We're back, and we're joined by one of our go-to guys on matters involving border security and immigration issues more generally. His name is Todd Bensman. He has an extraordinary background, an investigative reporter by training. He served as an intelligence officer in the Department of Public Safety in Texas. And he has been of late the National Security Fellow for an indispensable organization, the Center for Military Readiness, the Center for Immigration Studies. He has a terrific book on these issues, America's Covert Border War, and a new one forthcoming. We're waiting with bated breath for its arrival in the fall of this year. Todd Bensman, it's good to have you back. Welcome,
Good
sir.
to be here. Thanks.
You had a piece yesterday indicating that there's a little bit of good news on the Mexican side of the border with respect to the surge. And I must say, I hadn't expected to have any good news from you, but tell us what the latest is, thanks in part, at least, to Governor Greg Abbott in Texas.
Right. Well, recently, a caravan, the largest in history, 15,000, had formed down in southern Mexico. And the caravanners were on their way to the Del Rio sector of the Texas border. The Mexican government enabled that caravan to proceed by issuing thousands and thousands of humanitarian visas that allowed them to proceed finally to their northern border. When they got to the state of Coahuila, which is just across from the Del Rio, Texas area, Eagle Pass area, which is where they all wanted to cross, they ran into a buzzsaw. And what it was is state police were conducting roadblock operations. They were in bus stations pulling migrants off buses, turning buses around. Any road that went into this region was blocked, and the migrants removed and deported to the next southern state. And this is a really unusual thing to have happen. Usually, the Mexicans just kind of let them pass through like a turnstile. What it turned out to be, I found out, is that Governor Greg Abbott had cut a deal with the governor of Coahuila that they have to crack down on migrants or the governor's going to close down the bridges, the international bridges that bring in most of Mexico's export into the United States. They'd done that. And
And that, of course, is something he'd done earlier in the year, in April,
that's
right?
right. Yeah, he had shut it down for three or 4 days by using vehicle safety inspections. They would get a couple of Texas DPS guys to spend a lot of time on each truck, really thoroughly checking it, and until they cried uncle and said, "Okay, we'll stop the immigrants." This is an innovative, interesting, new kind of thing. I don't know how ultimately effective it's going to be, but we know that as that caravan was forming, Governor Abbott was going to the governor of Coahuila and saying, "Hey, remember that bridge thing we did? That's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen again if you don't, knock this thing out."
Shape
And they
up.
are doing that right now. Lots of those operations called Operation Mirror.
So it's not necessarily a commutation of sentence, shall we say, but it is a stay of execution, at least for a bit here. And it again, it speaks to the necessity, really, of these governors acting if the federal government of the United States is going to be so indifferent at best and at worst, a very considerable part of the problem. Todd, I wanted to ask you about one other thing that you've been reporting on. It's a very troubling facet of what you've talked about in your book, America's Covert Border War, namely the real threat from south of the border or points further removed coming across that southern border of, well, jihadists, among other possible national security threats. The FBI has been involved in a case revolving around a an Iraqi national. Tell us the backstory there. What's it about, and what does it suggest about the larger problem?
Well, very recently, the FBI and DOJ broke up a plot to assassinate the former president George W. Bush in Texas. The alleged perpetrator, is now under arrest and under indictment out of Ohio, was plotting to bring 8 ISIS assassins in over the Mexican border through Brazil, just like I write about in the book, on those trails through the Darien Gap jungle into Mexico, and then on up into the very broken border. And luckily, they got a couple of FBI informants in next to the guy and were able to, uh, break the plot up. But it was a real plot. The ISIS operatives were real people. The court records talk about how this Iraqi asylum seeker, who's based out of Ohio, actually had already moved in 2 Hezbollah operatives before this case even got going, hoping that they're trying to chase those down and figure out where they are. But what this really, the broader takeaway here about that case is that it shows that the bad guys recognize our border is in utter chaos and extremely vulnerable, and an opportunity. It represents an opportunity to do things like this. And I think that's the big takeaway from this. This is a very complicated and interesting case overall. I don't have time to go into all the details of it, but I will be following this case, looking for more disclosures in the court records.
Yeah. Well, again, this is the thing that distinguishes your uh, reporting on these challenging times, Todd Bensman, and it's so appreciated. You actually have got the expertise to follow the trails where they lead and to shed light on them as not hypothetical problems, but very real world ones. And I want to just draw you out on something because it's weighing on me tremendously, and that is that, as we've discussed before, a very substantial portion of those immigrants are unaccompanied military age men. And how many of them, whether they've got drug cartel backgrounds or whether they've got other jihadist or um, dangerous qualities to them, um, is anybody's guess. But the fact that they've been turned loose inside the United States in huge numbers, and for that matter, disseminated all over the place as well, has to constitute a national security threat. And you're one of the few people who both is covering this story day in and day out as a public policy challenge of the first order, but has the expertise to help, as they say, connect the proverbial dots on the national security side as well. Tell us a little bit more about how significant you see that problem being beyond this microcosmic example of this case, the Iraqi
Yeah,
one.
this is very, very concerning what's happening right now at the border. By filings in a court case, which I won't get into the details of, we actually have a line of sight on how many have gotten through gotaways. And it looks like we're up to about 750,000 gotaways
Oh my Lord.
reached the border and got through without being arrested in any way. And that's always going to be an undercount because it's very
Mm.
the border patrol is very conservative in the way that they tally these. But the people that are largely getting away are single adults. A great many of them men. I just had somebody telling me yesterday about operations out in the Douglas, Arizona area where hundreds and hundreds of they dress them in camouflage of young men are pouring over the wall, the fence, right in that area, and that the vast majority of these are people with very serious criminal histories. They're running and they're paying huge
Wow.
sums of money to get through that area because if they get caught, they likely will be returned. But high level criminal history people are pouring over this border right now because there really is no deportation beyond the border patrol zone of about 100 miles. The Biden administration, I want to emphasize this, the Biden administration has eliminated deportations in America of even the most serious criminals, violent criminals, sex offenders, pedophiles, rapists, uh, armed robbers, murderers. They are no longer deporting them. The Supreme Court recently ruled that they can't do that anymore. There are court cases winding through that are going to reverse that, but in the meantime, you know, God, tons have gotten through, and they're going to be here. We're going to live with this problem for a long time.
Well, living is the best case. Unfortunately, there's a distinct
Yeah,
possibility some of us are not going to
that's right.
live
No,
as a
as
result
we
of what
speak,
these people might have in mind for us. Yeah, and Todd, again, this is such vital work that you've been doing at the Center for Immigration Studies. I thank you for it. As I say, your book, America's Covert Border War, is really required reading, and the new one will be, I'm sure, every bit as much so. And we're looking forward to having a proper celebration of your new bestseller. Tell us the name of it again.
right now it's called Overrun, and it's about
Overrun.
this border crisis.
It says it all. Come back to us again with updates, Todd, as soon as you can, if you would, please. In the meantime, keep up the great
Thank
work
you.
and carry on. Next up, Kevin Freeman joins us. We'll talk with him a bit about, well, the budget disaster heading our way as a result of inflation right after this.